Today is April 10th edition of Back Roads of Illinois. We were Central Illinois agriculture source and the agricultural industry in Central Illinois and across the Midwest. I'm your host, Cesar Delgado, for today. We're having a good lineup for today's program with Jim Sutter from U.S. Soybean Council and Luke Crumley from Ohio Corn and Wheat Association. Also, we have our good friend Todd Gleason from the University of Illinois Extension in Urbana and Champaign. Well, this is our guest on today's program with them. It will be a great show for today. This time is for your agricultural news and information about the agricultural industry on back roads of Illinois. The state of Illinois, the above average temperature is pretty warm temperature range from lower 70 and range to 80 degree in the state of Illinois for this weekend next week. The farmers did put on their inputs in the field in the Midwest alongside in the Mississippi River Delta, the prices of fertilizer. It is pretty up, but it has fallen into the prices. The state of Kansas. They are going to have restrictions on the bird flu from CDC. CDC warned to drink raw milk in the dairy herd. Mexico has put on restrictions on the shipping of cattle on feed and dairy. This is your agricultural news for this morning. We are back with Jim Sutter from U.S. Soybean Council. Stay tuned. We are back with Jim Sutter from U.S. Soybean Export Council. Jim, how are you today? Welcome to join us for today.
Thank you, Cesar. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm doing just fine today. I hope you are too.
Let's start with our conversation about the trade deficit with China since 2018. This point, we are moving forward without doubt for China. Could you explain to our listeners about this issue?
Well, I think the U.S. has a long history of importing goods from China, manufactured goods mainly, and we see that change over the years. We saw a spike in that over the COVID time when we were importing a lot of particular goods. But from an agriculture perspective, which is what I look at, China is a very big buyer of U.S. agricultural goods and an important customer for the United States for agriculture.
Jim, how do you have any concerns about U.S. soybean has made shifting to being down to China from Brazil?
Cesar, that's an excellent question. And China, as a little background, China is the largest importer of soybeans in the world, of any country in the world. About 60%, 60% of all the soybeans that get into international trade, so that leave one country and go to another, end up in China. So I believe that it's natural that China will import from all exporting countries. The main exporters are Brazil, the United States, and to a smaller extent, Argentina. So China imports from all of these countries. And honestly, our market share is down this year. But really, our market share is down primarily because the last couple of years in the United States, we've actually grown smaller crops. Mother Nature or the weather hasn't cooperated. So our crop has been going down. Since 2 years ago, we grew 121 million tons, and then we were 116, and then we were 113. So we've actually had less soybeans available to export to China. So when that's happened, they've continued to take the soybeans they need. They've purchased a larger share of them from Brazil. I'm confident that if the United States, and I'm optimistic that this next year will grow a bigger crop, we'll be able to ship more soybeans to China. They would like to buy more U.S. soybeans if we have them available, and our market share will likely go back up again.
Really? I didn't know that. But we hope that back up for U.S. soybean farmers.
Right. U.S. soybean farmers have been working in China for 40 years, actually 42 now. They first started their activities in China in 1982. So we've built long relationships and have a long history of working together with customers in China. And in fact, the United States has helped those customers to develop their large pork, poultry, aquaculture businesses, their processing businesses. So I think there is a very strong tie between China and the U.S. So it's all about us having enough supply for them.
Do you think about Brazil's soybean production from the state of Mato Grosso do Sul? Could you tell our listeners about these things in South America?
Yes, that's another good question, Cesar. Mato Grosso is the state in Brazil where soybean production has really been growing over the last few years. And it's kind of in the center of Brazil, and it's land that wasn't actively farmed 20 years ago. So it's new land that has been brought into production. And they are rapidly growing. I think they're the largest producing state in Brazil now, and they're a good producer. So they are likely someone that will continue to be supplying the world with soybeans. But, that's a good thing overall because demand for soy continues to grow. And the U.S., we can't supply, we don't have more acres to bring into production. Our yields will go up, so we'll have more production that way, but we don't really have more land to bring into production. So as demand goes up in the world, in my opinion, it's good that there are a couple of suppliers, the United States and Brazil, so that importers feel comfortable and confident that there will be supplies available to them so they can continue to rely upon the international trade to supply their needs. So that's why I think the work that Mato Grosso is doing is good for consumers around the world and for the soybean trade in general.
Yes, I heard that they are competitors in Brazil.
Cesar, you are right. They are competitors, and they're tough competitors because they're good at what they do. They've got a lot of natural resources. They've got a lot of land. But again, I think that if we want consumers around the world to feel comfortable importing soy to meet their food nutrition needs, they need to be able to see that there's more than just one supplier. In case there were a drought in the US or a drought in Brazil, it's good that we're both there as suppliers so they can feel comfortable as importers. Sure, we would like to be the main exporter, but let's face it, we're only so big, and the global demand keeps growing. So I think it's good, healthy competition between the United States and Brazil.
Is there anything would you like to go to say about the poor conditions in South America?
Cesar, I would like to say that we've done a lot of work studying the different soybeans that come out of the United States and out of Brazil, and we believe, as you'd expect me to say, we believe that United States soybeans are the best soybeans available. They've got the strongest nutrient bundle, so people utilize soybeans to feed livestock, and we believe that U.S. soy is superior to do that. We think that there is, the growing conditions that we have for U.S. soybeans allow the soybeans to mature and dry down naturally, which that doesn't happen in Brazil, and that gives some quality advantages to U.S. soybeans. And finally, in the United States, we've got a very strong and reliable infrastructure. So the United States is able to export from many different ports on our coasts, so global buyers can buy from the United States with lots of a certainty that they will be getting what they're purchasing. So I think the U.S. has quality advantages, reliability advantages, and then, of course, there's this issue of sustainability that everyone is thinking about these days. And the United States has a very strong sustainability track record, and our soybeans have the lowest carbon footprint of any soybeans shipped from any origin to other countries in the world.
Very good. Finally, what is your advice to the U.S. soybean farmers in the Midwest right now?
Cesar, that's a good question. So my advice, I've got a couple things to say. I would say first, be very careful as you're out planting your crop. Safety is always paramount, and the equipment these days is huge. So I'm always thinking about people and encouraging them to make sure they're being safe. Secondly, the world needs what you can produce. So thank you for being such good farmers, good stewards of the land, for doing it in such a sustainable way. I know that global buyers are looking for good quality U.S. agricultural products, whether it be soybeans or corn, the other product, often in the Midwest rotated with soybeans. And I think look forward to good crops this coming year and being produced in a very sustainable way.
Back roads of Illinois with Luke Crumley from Ohio Corn and Wheat Association.
Well, it's great to be with you today.
How are you, Luke? We're glad you're here on the show for today.
Well, I'm great, and I'm grateful to be here with you. It's a rainy day here in Ohio, and planting just kind of started to get rolling. We've got some folks out in the fields testing the equipment, making sure they're going to be ready when things clear up here. So we're at that really hopeful beginning portion of the season here in Ohio for our corn crop and our soybean crop. And I'll tell you, as I've driven around Ohio over the last couple of weeks, getting to see the bright green fields of soft red winter wheat popping up too. I love this time of year for that. It's a great time, and I know our growers are excited to get rolling.
Yes, sir, I love it. Let's start our conversation with the Ohio Corn and Wheat Association in the great state of Ohio. Could you tell our listeners about your organization to the farmers in the Midwest?
Yeah. Well, and you're off to the perfect start by reminding everyone that it's the great state of Ohio. We never stop reminding folks of that ourselves. But I am the director of public policy and sustainability at Ohio Corn and Wheat. And that means I am under the association staff. I'm our lobbyist, our in-house lobbyist for state and federal policy issues. And I support our checkoffs with my work in the sustainability space, which covers everything from water quality work here in Ohio through understanding emerging carbon markets and market opportunities that are developing within sustainable agriculture. So that's my role, but let's talk real quick about our organization, because it's not just one organization. Ohio Corn and Wheat is a strategic alliance of three separate organizations. We have our corn marketing program, our small grains marketing program. Colloquially, people would refer to those as checkoff programs here in Ohio. And those are organizations that collect voluntary contributions from farmers across Ohio anytime they sell grain here in the state. And those dollars can be used for research, market development, and education. Importantly, by law, those dollars cannot be used for lobbying work, which is where our Growers Association comes in. Our Growers Association is a membership organization where individual growers pay a membership due every 1 or 3 years, depending on how they do it. And those dollars that we collect there can be used to support our advocacy work, to promote good policy. And it's a really important balance between those. We're very strict in Ohio about how those dollars can be used, and the firewalls that we build to make sure those checkoff dollars are not misused. But it's a really important balance because we can only do so much as an industry focusing on research, market development, education. We also have to recognize that we don't farm in a vacuum, that public policy happens at the federal, state, and local level that impacts what growers can do on their farm and their ability to transition that farm to subsequent generations. And that's where our policy work comes in. So that's kind of Ohio Corn and Wheat, the whole organization. And then I focus heavily on that association piece in the lobbying work that I do on behalf of Ohio's 30,000 grain producers. When they think of farm advocacy, and I'm guilty of this myself. I worked for 2 members of Congress here in Ohio before I transitioned into this work. And I don't come from a farming background. My family sold the farm off back in the 80s. But when I was a congressional staffer, when I thought of farm organizations, really, I only ever thought of the Farm Bureau. And the Farm Bureau is great. It's massive. It has great reach, and it represents everyone, all those different interests in agriculture. But we exist to focus in on the issues that are really important for corn farmers and small grain farmers here in Ohio. Focusing on how do we make sure that policy exists to keep market opportunity around to make corn farming and small grain farming profitable in the Buckeye State? So we work heavily on issues like promoting biofuels and ethanol and making sure that consumers have access to those fuels. We're working a lot right now on the future of sustainable aviation fuel. And it's not just market opportunities like that. Sometimes it's protecting the social license to farm. So we're there, in lockstep with organizations like the Farm Bureau to promote a comprehensive farm bill and try to make sure that a farm bill happens this year and that Congress doesn't kick the can down the road again. We're also working on things like tax policy and, making sure that it's just a little bit easier for growers to stay in business, because we know how difficult it is to make a profit in these really challenging times with record high input prices and with all the myriad challenges that our growers face. Every opportunity to open a new market or make being in the business a little bit easier is something we have to pursue. So that's what we're working on.
Yes, that's true. What is your sources for your farmers in Ohio about the Farm Bill? Unlikely. That is not going to be passed for this year.
Yeah, and I took some lumps on the chin back in January of 2023, because as early as that, I was telling folks here in Ohio, don't plan on a farm bill passing in 2023. And that was not a popular opinion to hold at the time because everyone wanted to see it done last year. I wanted to see it done last year, but the political realities just weren't matching up with what we wanted to see happen. We're in a highly polarized time. We have difficulties bringing the majority and the minority parties together on anything, especially something that is slated to cost anywhere from 1.1 to 1.5 trillion dollars in overall spending. It's a difficult challenge, and frankly, I was skeptical about it in 2023. I'm still skeptical about it in 2024. The shining ray of hope that we see is that Chairman Thompson, G.T. Thompson of Pennsylvania, who chairs the U.S. House Agriculture Committee, is sending all kinds of signals that he's ready to take a bill to markup in committee on the House side. So we could see some movement as early as May on the House side. But folks have to remember this piece of legislation has to go through both houses of Congress and still be in a position where it could be signed by the sitting president. And the Senate is not there yet to mark up their own version of a farm bill. So right now, there are a lot of questions about timing on this thing. It's a massively challenging piece of legislation to begin with. It requires a bipartisan coalition across the board to get this thing done. Neither party has enough votes to force their agenda completely through the farm bill, regardless of whatever political posturing you might hear out in the countryside. It's a challenging cycle to be working on this thing, and that's why growers have to be involved now. Even though it may be frustrating that it didn't happen in 2023, even if we may be skeptical about the prospects of the bill this year, it's as important as ever that growers continue to be involved in the organizations that are representing them, whether they're a grain farmer like the folks I represent, or they're involved in animal agriculture, or they're in agribusiness. All of us have to continue to be at the table right now because we don't know when, but this thing is going to get some steam at some point, and we've got to be ready to make sure our priorities are represented in that really complex legislation.
Come on, Congress, work together on the farm bill economy.
Yep.
I can't say that our show, but stop spending.
Yeah, the big politics question right now is how are all of these other spending packages affecting Speaker Johnson's ability to get a comprehensive farm bill done? I was on the Hill a couple of weeks ago, and within the Ohio delegation, it was a resounding common sentiment that all of them were frustrated that we're still talking about the farm bill, because they all believe that if a compromise package came to the floor today, they'd pass it today. But it's getting through those leadership hurdles and actually getting text into legislation that's really complex. It all happens behind the scenes. Most people just don't see that part of the process, including most members of Congress, because unless you're on the Agriculture Committee, Farm Bill is not your top priority. That's the reality, whether we like it or not. The folks who are working on the Farm Bill are the folks on committee right now, and they have to scrape and scratch for every bit of calendar time they can get to in the midst of all these other things that are happening, like the funding fights that just wrapped up for 2024 spending. By the way, now we're in the appropriation season for 2025. So this $1.5 trillion bill has to thread a needle in the midst of Congress talking about a whole lot of other discretionary spending. And it is going to be really frustrating for people in the countryside to see this thing wither on the vine. But there's a very real possibility that come the end of September, we have to seek another extension on the Farm Bill. I don't want that. Nobody wants that, but we have to hold Congress accountable. No one else is going to do it for us. And they have to hear from agricultural organizations that this is a top priority. So that's one of the many things we work on. And it's really our top priority right now.
Right. We too in central Illinois. Can you explain between the Republicans and Democrats about the CPR, Luke?
So are you talking about the conservation programs within the Farm Bill?
Yes.
Okay. So broadly, and I touched on this a little bit when I talked about Chairwoman Stabenow. I'd say broadly, there's pretty good support for conservation programs within the Farm Bill. I think even Republicans acknowledge that, if we're going to ask farmers to adopt conservation programs and try out new best management practices, having an ability to support them in that makes a lot of sense. So that's not really the problem. The problem boils down to new dollars that have been created over the last couple of years for specific conservation work to meet agenda items of the Biden administration. And Chairwoman Stabenow is really heavily focused on protecting those dollars and making sure that they are now baseline funding within the Farm Bill. And House Republicans don't like that. They'd like to see some of those dollars go away, probably. But again, these are the issues that people get hung up on. That we have to make sure our champions within corn country are equipped to be able to go and say, hey, here's how this could work. Let's bring more people together in the conversation so that, it's not just people digging in their heels because they have a certain amount of sway within a committee. So that's where I encourage our growers, our members, to continuously be reinforcing the messages we have for our delegation, no matter what part of the state they're from, no matter what committee they're on. They need to hear from us that we want a comprehensive farm bill now, that we support conservation as part of that. We support, all of these titles for a reason. And partisanship is the last thing that we want on a piece of legislation that's really one of the few holdout nonpartisan pieces of legislation that's out there. Historically, the Farm Bill is a bill that folks come together to make happen because we all have a vested interest in making sure that food production and fuel production and fiber production happen domestically. We all have a vested interest in making sure that there's food security in this country. And we have to be able to move the various parties away from their hard positions and get them to where they're working together. And compromise is not a dirty word. It's what our system is built on. So I think as the year progresses, if farm organizations are more vocal about the need for a farm bill now, a permanent farm bill that lasts us for 5 years and isn't a year by year appropriation, that helps us move the Republicans and the Democrats off of their hard positions and towards the middle. Here's the challenge, though. This fall, you could see a tremendously different political dynamic. I'm not one to try to predict how the presidential election is going to pan out, because that is, it's not one election. It's 50 states in the DC area that all get their own election, right? There are too many variables there for anyone to predict what's going to happen. But the trends on the legislature right now, it's a toss-up. You could see the Senate flip from Democrat control to Republican control, and you could see the House flip from Republican control to Democrat control. And then you have a whole host of different dynamics at play where you have a new chairperson in either house leading what will likely be narrow margins in both chambers. And who knows? That's why it's so important for us to push for a farm bill now with the known actors at play, get it done before the end of September so that we're not relying on a whole host of unpredictable variables in a lame duck Congress come November. That would be a real, it could be a problem. It could be an opportunity. No one knows what it's going to look like. And we're not going to have any of those answers until the day after Election Day.
Right. Luke, we have to watch it on. This fall. Time is running out. Do you have any final thoughts on the Farm Bill and your organization?
Yeah. I would say the biggest thing to remember is that no matter what you grow, no matter what you raise, there are organizations that represent your interests, whether that's the Farm Bureau or an organization like Ohio Corn and Wheat or Illinois Corn, our good friends there. These organizations are all plugged in, and what's important is we're all working together. We can't leave it up to our elected officials to know everything that matters to us. Your membership in an organization like Ohio Corn and Wheat, your membership in the Farm Bureau, all help empower us taking your voice to the halls of power, whether that's a state capitol or Washington, D.C., and allow us to make sure that these people who are largely not connected to agriculture understand just how important all of these pieces are to making agriculture successful in this country. And that's what we're working on in Ohio, and what I hope the folks who listen to this episode will get excited about, and maybe pick up that postcard they got from their farm organization and sign back up and help lend their voice to the fight, because that's what we need.
Thanks, Luke.
Anytime.
This is Luke Crumley from Ohio Corn and Wheat Association. We were going to talk with Todd Gleason from the University of Illinois Extension in Urbana. I'm joining now with Todd Gleason from the University of Illinois Extension in Urbana and Champaign. How are you doing, Bud?
I'm doing really well. It's good to talk with you again today, Cesar. I always like having a nice conversation with you, and hope you're doing well as well.
Let's start with our conversation about the farm doc on Brazilian production in poor quality in central Brazil. How did the farm doc put it together over the winter?
Well, as you know, the Farm Doc team has been very, very interested in what's been happening in Brazil as it pertains to how it impacts what happens in the United States. Joanna Calusi joined the team several years ago. She's a native of Brazil, a journalist, an agricultural economist that works here on campus at the U of I, and she's done a lot of work. She travels back and forth. She had covered agriculture across Brazil as it was developing into a world leader. And now she covers it. She covered it as a journalist, and now she covers it as an agricultural economist and does the back end sort of numbers of it. Has very good contacts there. And she travels back and forth often to her native nation. And so she was there after the planting season had finished and through the winter break or holiday season. So she was able to get a good idea of what took place early on in the cropping systems there, and then can check periodically to see as well how those crops are coming along. So that's kind of where that information comes from. And then they work closely with other academics at institutions in Brazil. So not only Joanna, but the rest of the Farm Doc team, Nick Paulson, Gary Schnitke, Bruce Sherrick, Scott Irwin all will participate in some fashion or another in those particular conversations. So the Farm Doc team keeps a very, very good handle on what's happening in Brazil as it's related to current crop conditions, number of acres, how that's traded across the planet, and then, of course, trying to extrapolate what expectations might be as it's related to upcoming changes in acreage, hectares in their case, or maybe the crop mix, all those sorts of things.
We both have interviewed her on the corn and beans in Brazil. She is working hard on her knowledge that brings up to here.
Yeah, Joanna does just a magnificent job. She has been an incredible addition to the Farm Doc team, and I know they are glad to have her on the team. Personally, as somebody who gets a chance to talk with her and travel with her around the state, I know that every time she is in front of a crowd, that crowd, no matter who else is up with her, will ask more questions about Brazil, the competition that's coming from them, and what the expectations might be than they will of anything else that's happened in the day. If she's there, there will be questions from the farmers, the producers, the politicians about the competition that's coming from South America and what it means to U.S. agriculture and its role on the global stage.
I enjoy talking with her on the show about agricultural in Brazil.
Yeah, I do too. I really do. Joanna is just so very knowledgeable about Brazilian agriculture. In fact, one of her latest Farm Doc articles is really good. Trying to and we get this question over the winter a lot, trying to let folks understand what the cropping mix is, how it's changed, and what expansion possibilities there might be. So, because much of that nation is so close to the equator, in fact, the equator runs across the nation. So, there are parts of the nation that are in the northern hemisphere. There are two things that happen. One is that they have a very long growing season, and so they're able to double crop, sometimes to triple crop some of these areas. There is a third, very small, but a third corn crop in their normal growing season. And so that double cropping acreage is one of the ways that they can expand crop production, and they can double crop acreage efficiently at managing to double that acre's production. So you, instead of counting it as one, if it has two crops on it a year, you'll count that as 2 acres. And then there is a set of acres, as she explains in this recent Farm Doc Daily article. It's up on the line now at farmdocdaily.illinois.edu. And titled Potential for Crop Expansion in Brazil Based on Pasture Land and Double Cropping. So the pasture land is the other part of this, which is land that they can bring into production. Brazil has some pretty strict rules about how that happens, but she describes what takes place and what the potential is. There are some maps there that give you ideas in acreage of how much acreage can come up. And there are a couple of actually really easy to understand tables as well. For instance, we talk about the Center West or Mato Grosso. The Center West encompasses a couple of other places. Mato Grosso in potential, mostly, there's 30 million acres there. And 18.2 of those have a safrinha or second crop corn on them. So there are 30 million acres of soybeans in Mato Grosso itself, followed by corn, and there's 18.2 million acres there. And so we talk about the double crop, we talk about the pasture land, and she just does a magnificent job of putting it all together and trying to give some context to what the Brazilian competition looks like on the world stage.
Yes, Todd, Next question is, how did the University of Illinois in Urbana posted on the acreage report on March 28th from the Department of Agriculture? Could you explain to our listeners about that?
Well, there are a couple of things. So I am a farm broadcaster for University of Illinois Extension, and I deal, as all farm broadcasters, including you, Cesar, with USDA reports on a regular basis. So I will take account of those numbers and post them onto the website for WILL, which is where my home radio station happens to be, willag.org. And I keep USDA reports there. And then during my own daily radio program, I'll talk to a series of analysts from around the nation, not within the university itself, and then sometimes from the university as well. So on most reports days, or many of them, the farm doc team, the agricultural economists at the University of Illinois, particularly as it relates to these March reports, the grain stocks reports, the prospective plantings report, will put those numbers into context. And I'll either talk to them that day for their immediate reaction, oftentimes that day for their immediate reaction. And then after they get a chance to think about it and to post an article, I'll come back with their deeper analysis and talk to them more about the USDA report. And that happens with most of the reports. Of course, there are monthly reports, the World Agricultural Supply and Demand estimates that come out in that 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th day of the month, each and every month of the year. The next big one is in May, really. The April report for the WASDE is an update, but the next WASDE will include supply and demand tables for the United States new crop, and that'll be the first really official working supply and demand tables USDA releases. So we'll cover that on that May report as well. But from the university itself, the farm doc team does deep analysis. I do a quick, dirty, short term. What happened today? What did the report say? And that all comes, both of them are actually located at the willag.org website if you want to see them. The reports are there along with the analysis from the farm doc team, I should say all three. And then in the daily closing market report and commodity week, we'll discuss it as well.
Of course, I do as well. I will talk with the analysis in the country, especially in Illinois.
Yep. And you and I will talk to many of the same folks. You talk to a few different ones than I do, but most farm broadcasters will take a look at all the things that are impacting agriculture and the flow of goods across the planet.
Todd, what is your sources for the bird flu epic from the University of Illinois Extension for right now?
Well, there are a couple of things about avian influenza and the high path version of this H5N1 virus. It's been around for a while. It travels primarily within the wild bird migration areas. So there are a couple of migration flows across the United States. One of them comes across Iowa, Illinois, parts of Indiana, and as well, and then another one further to the west. So it's not surprising that commercial flocks, even backyard chickens, will be impacted by avian influenza. We've been covering this for some time. The University of Illinois Veterinary Medicine folks have followed it, and bird flu, like many kinds of viruses, can move from one mammal or one species to another. It doesn't often happen, but we do track it at the university. So the vet med folks will do that. Jim Lowe specializes in infectious diseases, and he follows it closely. He wrote an article actually about this last year, not this March, but last March, more than a year ago. And then University of Illinois Extension has its own website that deals with wild birds and domestic flocks, so poultry, turkeys, chickens, whether that's a commercial flock or whether you just have a few backyard chickens, and how you can help to manage the spread of this particular disease, because it just if it infects your flock, you're going to lose your animals most likely. And so you want to be very careful with it. And those are a couple of the resources that University of Illinois Extension and the campus have that people can access on the web just by searching for avian flu or bird flu, avian influenza, even probably H5N1 if they like, comma, and then illinois.edu, and that'll bring up the University of Illinois websites that are related to avian influenza.
Part of the Mississippi River Delta near St. Louis and in the Quad Cities area.
Yeah, those will be in the migration areas. You're right. And so it's mostly, you should just realize that bird flu travels with migrating birds. So if you have birds and you know that they migrate through your area, and everybody does, this disease, which has mostly stayed in the bird populations, is likely to be there and trying to plants that fast. It is an unbelievable feat that the American farmer carries out in a few weeks each and every season, and have for decades, for a couple of centuries now, close to that. And so it really, or at least a century. So it really is an amazing feat. And when you think about it in context, it's the ingenuity of the human race is phenomenal.
Follow question. Could you tell our listeners about the University of Illinois in Urbana and Champaign? It's a land-grant university.
Yeah, it is a land-grant university. Those were brought into being by Abraham Lincoln. And so this land-grant university is located in Urbana, Champaign. There are land grants, more than one sometimes, in each and every state within the system. In Illinois, the land grant was about 30,000 acres to begin with, so mostly farmland to support, this was from the state of Illinois, to support the system itself. The federal government helps as well, and still does in many cases. And the land grant has a threefold mission: teaching, research, and outreach. So it's pretty easy to understand. The University of Illinois is an educational institution. So there are students that come and they work with the professors in their respective fields, and then work towards graduating with a master's degree or a bachelor's degree or a PhD. And that's one of the three functions of the university. Research is a primary function as well. So all the kinds of things that you sometimes take for granted that are, let me just give you a couple of them. And these come across that are pretty funny. These come from many different land grants. So stitches that dissolve, first developed for animal sciences here at the University of Illinois. Wisconsin, which is the land grant, Madison, the University of Wisconsin, animal sciences again, is blood pressure medicine. And that came out of animal sciences, and frankly was a way to control rodent populations in dairy barns. but found a use within the human body. And so has become blood pressure medicine. And that's part of the research, basic science that happens. It is not funded as well as I think it should be, honestly. I think taxpayers have gotten away from funding basic science research. And the issue that this causes is that companies oftentimes will not follow science that isn't going to give them a return. So if they make an investment, they really want a return on that investment. But if they don't see the return on the investment, it may be a really functional piece of science, but if there's no way to capitalize on it at the moment, they may just discard it. Researchers on campuses do not do that. They follow science, and oftentimes that science will create very, very good things for the human population, but it might take a little time, or they just decide because they're curious that they want to follow it up, and then that leads to an extraordinary set of new discoveries. So that's research, and then outreach or extension. Kind of things that I do, that many of the Farm Doc team members do. Those are taking the science-based information that has been developed, followed, and screened at the university by the professors, and delivers that out for use to the population. So in the state of Illinois, we are charged with delivering information to the population that can help them to provide better lifestyles for themselves and for their families. So those three things, teaching, research, and outreach, are the basics of all land-grant universities, including the University of Illinois.
Yes, sir. We were lucky to have the land-grant University of Illinois in Urbana because Central Illinois is God country with rich soils.
It is. They are some of the best soils on the planet. Maybe in some parts of Illinois, the best soils on the planet. And those, I must admit, run from Champaign to Springfield. You can find some extraordinary soils for the growth of row crops, corn, soybeans, wheat, and other items.
Thanks, Todd.
Oh, you're welcome, Cesar. Thank you.
My pleasure that you joined the show for today. Thanks. You're welcome to join the show anytime.
Thank you. Give me a call again soon.
This is Todd Gleason from the University of Illinois Extension in Urbana and Champaign. Todd is a foreign broadcaster for the University of Illinois Extension. We will be right back with our last segment of the show. Welcome back on Back Roads of Illinois. We're glad you're here with us. We were going to talk with Mike north of Everett in Platteville, Wisconsin for tomorrow's program. We were going to talk about the World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimate report on Thursday's morning from the Department of Agriculture. We'll watch the markets for this planting season. However, spring is here with the warm weather than average temperatures in the Midwest alongside in Central Plains. We're ready for this planting season. We will have to watch the Masters in Georgia because college basketball season is over. However, college baseball seems perfect for watch this spring until August to start with college football season. Well, folks, there's our show. You can subscribe to our show on YouTube, and you can catch up past episodes of Back Roads of Illinois on YouTube. See you tomorrow. For Back Roads of Illinois, I am Cesar Delgado. Have a great day.